When we think of the richest people who have ever lived, names like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk probably come to mind. But compared to the wealth of this week's subject, their billions are peanuts. Mansa Musa's wealth adjusted to inflation would be way over 400 billion. He got so rich that when he traveled, he practically crashed the economy of the city he visited. So who was the richest man to ever live? So rich he caused an economic collapse just by traveling. Roll the intro. We've said it before and we'll say it again. The 14th century was an absolute banger of a time period. There were massive empires all over the place. One of the biggest was the Mali Empire located in West Africa. By the early 1300s, they controlled the gold mines of the region, as well as salt mines, and had a monopoly on the trans-Saharan trade routes. This made them unimaginably wealthy. In fact, one of their cities, Timbuktu, became a major center of trade and one of the largest universities in the world. But back to our story. At this time, Mali was ruled by a guy named Musa, also known as Mansa Musa, which basically means King Musa. Now the thing is that Musa wasn't actually supposed to be king. His predecessor, the previous Mansa, set out on a voyage to explore beyond the Atlantic Ocean and never came back. And so Musa, who was the governor of a province, was appointed to take his place. So basically, if the previous Mansa hadn't disappeared, Musa would have been a local governor for life. But because of his predecessor's voyage, Musa wound up becoming the Mansa and getting incredibly rich in the process. You see, the Mali Empire was insanely wealthy due to controlling most of the gold in the area, as well as being the middleman in the lucrative trans-Saharan trade. This meant that whenever someone wanted gold in northern Africa or Europe, they had to go through Mali first, which made them a ton of money. But not only did the Mali Empire control key trade routes, but they also had control over other very valuable commodities, namely salt. Salt was extremely valuable in those days, since it was used as a preservative, and people would often trade a pound of salt for a pound of gold. Mali also controlled some of the largest gold mines in the world at the time, which made them even more rich. One of their mines, Bure, produced between 30 to 40 tons of gold per year, which is worth tens of millions of dollars even today. So with all this wealth, what did the Mansa do with it? Well, one day he decided he wanted to go on a pilgrimage to the Mecca. Mecca, for those of you who don't know, is a city in Saudi Arabia, and it's the holiest city in Islam. Every Muslim is expected to visit Mecca at least once in their life. But Musa wasn't any ordinary Muslim. He wanted to do it in style. And by style, I mean with a convoy that has become the stuff of legend. In 1324, Mansa set out on his pilgrimage to Mecca with him. He brought along 60,000 men, 21 tons of gold, and hundreds of elephants and camels. Yeah, that's no typo. Elephants and camels. Apparently he sent an advance party ahead to let Mecca know that he was coming so that they could prepare. But they probably didn't mention just how many people were accompanying the Mansa, because when the massive convoy arrived in Mecca, 2 years later, in 1325, it overwhelmed the city. To put just how big this convoy was into perspective, imagine if someone like Taylor Swift showed up to your town with 60,000 women, 21 tons of gold, and a few hundred elephants and camels. You might be wondering why he brought elephants on a pilgrimage. But apparently there was an elephant wrestling competition taking place in Cairo, and Mansa wanted to show off all his power by competing. As the pilgrims made their way to Mecca, they lavished gold on all passers-by. In fact, they spent so much gold in Cairo, Medina, and Mecca that they practically became homeless. In medieval times, when you gave someone gold, they usually gave you something in return. Usually it was a service of some kind, but sometimes it was just another bar of gold. Either way, when you give something to someone, they usually give you something back. So when the Malians started giving away all their gold, people started giving them less in return. Soon enough, the Malians were spending so much gold, it was practically worthless. While the Malians had no trouble acquiring gold, now no one would accept gold in trade anymore. You couldn't even pay your servants with it. That's how devalued it became. It took years for Cairo's economy to recover. But Mansa didn't care about the economy of Cairo. He had somewhere else to be. After finishing his pilgrimage, Mansa set out to return home. Along the way, he founded new cities and commissioned dozens of mosques, schools, and libraries. He even gifted the city of Tunis a massive library, which, according to some sources, contained over 70,000 manuscripts. Eventually, the whole empire returned to Mali and Mansa, became a folk hero across the Islamic world and parts of Europe. In fact, Mali became so famous that it ended up on a map from the 14th century called the Catalan Atlas. The atlas was created by a cartographer named Abraham Cresques and depicted the known world in the early 1370s. It was incredibly detailed for its time period, showing cities, mountains, and rivers. And although Mali was thousands of miles away from Europe, it was still shown on the map because of how famous it had become. During Mansa's reign, Mali grew to become one of the largest empires in history. They covered a huge chunk of modern-day Mali, as well as parts of Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Under his rule, the empire flourished. They built amazing works of architecture, funded schools and universities, and became incredibly wealthy from the gold trade. After Mansa died in 1337, his wealth was divided among his family, and the empire eventually split apart. But Mali remained a powerful force in the region for centuries. After it became one of the most important centers of Islamic scholarship in the world. The Mansa Musa's story isn't just about gold. It's about how one ruler turned his wealth into a global legend. He wasn't the first to travel to Mecca, and he wouldn't be the last. But thanks to his unbelievable wealth, he became the most legendary of them all. When you think of the richest people who have ever lived, you probably think of people like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or maybe even Kanye West. But compared to Mansa Musa, their wealth is peanuts. Mansa Musa's empire was so wealthy, it literally changed the value of gold. So what legacies do today's wealthiest individuals leave behind? Let us know your thoughts. And speaking of wealthy people, check out this video on the richest woman who ever lived, and stay tuned for more.